What's up, guys? It is Q&A time on March 10th, 2019. Went back and did a topic-specific Q&A this week. I haven't really done one in a little while, so thought it would be something different. Did prep/fat loss Q&A. Definitely appropriate for this time of year, since there's a lot of people in contest prep right now, or people trying to lose some of that winter fluff. So yeah. Let's go ahead and jump right into the questions here on Instagram. First one, any tips or tricks to help expedite recovering your thyroid after T3 use during the last 4 to 8 weeks of prep? Okay, so biggest thing is really just going to be supplying your thyroid gland with proper nutrients. I mean, you're naturally going to recover, from raising calories and reducing cardio and things like that. So reducing, systemic stress load as a whole, but making sure that you have sufficient iodine, sufficient selenium, sufficient zinc, most of your, primary thyroid nutrients. So iodine, it's the dose. I mean, you're going to hear tons of different doses. I mean, you might work up to a milligram, maybe a couple milligrams, and then taper back down, because typically we're looking at RDAs actually in micrograms, so go up a little bit higher than that. And with your selenium, 200 to 400 milligrams, I mean, it's a pretty big range, obviously, but if you're getting a little bit from food, maybe, then you could probably go 200 and then get a little bit more from food. There are some food sources that are pretty high in selenium and zinc, and those things that's pretty easy to get. So that's what I would say. Maybe just go a little bit harder, and you could actually, if you wanted to, you could use things like thyroid glandulars to help boost the repair the gland. That's kind of a holistic thing. You'll see some products have it in there. You'll see like products that have adrenal glandulars and thyroid and pancreas, and I mean, there's all kinds of different. It's basically just the gland ground up, from porcine or bovine or whatever the source is. So you can use things like that. It's just I wouldn't use it too long. I would just use it until you're recovered and then stop, and then keep the other nutrients in there at a reasonable dose. And next one, Cardarine, good for females. Most optimal duration of time. Example, could use it straight for 20 weeks of prep, or best to save and use later when needed. I mean, you could always use that rule of thumb. It's best to save your fat loss agents and use them later when needed. Yeah, I mean, females can certainly use it just like a male. Dosage. If somebody's using it, I don't have a lot of people that use it anymore, to be completely honest, but if someone's using it, I tend to go on the lower end, just because I know the research says that some of the issues arise it's extremely high. The dosing's much higher, but if someone's going to use it, better safe than sorry, and just add a little bit, 10 milligrams a day. Duration. I'm not sure that there is a ton of literature showing duration, like certain durations or optimal durations. It's probably not in humans, especially, not for fat loss purposes, most likely. Probably isn't anything that specific in the research. There could be, maybe not. But yeah, use it later when needed, 8 weeks, 12 weeks maybe. Okay, so transitioning between shows, 4-week gap between each specifically. Do you bring the diet back to 4 weeks out from show 1 and repeat, or how do you like to approach this? Well, it says 4 weeks gap between each specifically. I'm not sure how many there are. Now, if you're talking about, if there's multiple, you're doing a show, 4 weeks, a show, 4 weeks, a show. I mean, you're going to start running into issues at that point. I actually just did a podcast on this last week. You're only going to get a couple shows out of there before things start to deteriorate, depending on the person and their metabolism, where they were, before the prep started in terms of metabolically, how stressful the prep has been, all that stuff. I mean, that's obviously all that stuff's going to matter pretty substantially. But I mean, you're not gonna be able to peak optimally for more than maybe a couple in most people. So how would you go about it? Yeah, I mean, again, it really just depends on, what do you look like? Were you hard enough and lean enough for the first show? Or you need to just continue to push the diet and cardio and deficit and things like that and get better for the second show? So really, it's just going to depend on body composition. If you look good, if you peaked pretty much perfect for the first show, then you might actually be able to reduce cardio slightly and add in a little bit of food, and just hold that spot, and you'll get some metabolic upregulation, some super compensation effect, and you might actually look a little bit better in the second show. But that's only really if you're nailed it, peaked, peeled, dry. I'm not sure what class this is, not really. That would matter as well. But yeah, you would only really be able to do that if you were, really dialed in for that first one. If not, then you just need to keep going. So you wouldn't be able to really go back to a 4-week out diet. But really just look at your diet previous to peak week. If you did something during the final week, the loading strategy or reduced cardio or whatever you did, just reference back the week before that. That's probably going to be a better gauge. Wish I could give you a little more on that, but there's a lot of context there, or a lot of context that's needed. Okay, so next one, subs to keep your thyroid working throughout fat loss phase, and what fat loss subs do you use without cycling during this phase as well? Well, I mentioned some of the micronutrients above. That's pretty much going to stand regardless, and you can use things like if you're going the OTC route and not using exogenous, I'm assuming you're not using exogenous T4 and T3 because that would have been the answer already. But assuming you're not using those things, something like T2, like over the counter, the thyronines, I believe is how you say it, Diatos, the 3.3 and the 3.5. Yeah, those are really good. I'm plugging products here, but I work with Morphogen Nutrition, and they make Morphoburn, which is a non-stim product that helps with caloric expenditure, and there is the T2s in there, and then the other variations in the Morpholean. The Morphoburn doesn't need to be cycled though, just because there's no suppression. So yeah, the T2s would be good. They actually have some literature behind them that shows that they do increase metabolic rate and thyroid output. So those would be pretty good options. Other fat loss subs, those, yeah. Without, you're talking about cycling though. Once I'm adding them in a prep, asking, yeah, prep, fat loss phase, saying fat loss phase, but I'm going to add those things in really at a point in the fat loss phase where I'm probably not going to pull them out until we're done. You know what I mean? So it's not like I'm actually cycling them within the fat loss phase. You certainly could, if you wanted to use something that needed cycled, like something that was really heavy stimulant wise, like you're using a lot of yohimbine HCl or even like clenbuterol or something, you could just rotate, you're hitting different receptors. You're hitting, not that the receptors don't desensitize either. That's kind of a myth, or that is a myth. So, but just talking like total stimulant load, if you wanted to rotate clen and yohimbine and then towards the end combine them both, you could do something like that. You don't have to. Again, I'm more likely to just add those things in when I know that they're going to be used the rest of the fat loss phase anyhow. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at it. Yeah, I would definitely look into the Morphoburn as a non-stim option. It's really, super versatile. Males, females can use it as long as you want, and then start adding your stem stuff on top of it, like the Morpholean's good, or just straight yohimbine HCl or alpha yohimbine, or clenbuterol or ephedrine or synephrine, whatever your beta receptor compound you want to use. Those are really your primary options. There's some different stuff, like if you look into that Morphoburn formula, there's some different things in there that will help slow down metabolic adaptions and help with caloric expenditure. So those aren't necessarily stimulant based. but they're, you know, helping with fat loss because they're basically calorie wasting. So yeah, there are several options like that. But again, that's kind of my view on how you would use them rather than like cycling them in the prep. I hope that makes sense. Or in the fat loss phase. Okay. One more on Instagram, it looks like. Before every blood donation, I have my blood tested and have low hemoglobin levels on the lower end of the range or slightly lower. Also, blood pressure is low. Can this be due to fasted state? Any tips raising hemoglobin and blood pressure for more context? Not eating a lot of iron sources, mainly cocoa, meat, grains, some fruit, and veggies. I'm sure I'm getting about 50 to 80% recommended dose every day, maybe slightly more. Also, I'm not experiencing serious side effects of low hemoglobin, if any at all. Maybe I'm screwed up and do not know that I have some. Also, I'm pretty lean year round. You kind of answered your own question within that, because somebody like that, I probably wouldn't even suggest donating blood. I actually had a question about this a couple weeks back about whether you should actually donate blood or not, if it's actually that beneficial, if hemoglobin and hematocrit are as important as they say, or if we should be watching platelets and things of that nature. So kind of a controversial thing. I talked about it. I won't go into all that. You can go back and check that one out. I think it was probably 2 weeks ago. It'll be in the questions in the description of the video, so you can see it. I just wouldn't donate blood if I were you. I would probably, next time you get your blood checked, I would have hemoglobin, hematocrit checked. I'm assuming you're probably getting hematocrit checked as well. But I would also have iron checked, ferritin checked, B12 checked, folate. If you get all your B vitamins checked, might as well. MCV. What else? Basically, get a full CBC. There's several, like the MCV and several other markers in there that'll show like if potential vitamin deficiencies, then you can have the actual vitamins checked. But you probably just don't need to donate blood. You're probably depleting these things worse by donating blood, and I would get those checked. And you may need more iron. I know that's actually how I am. I don't donate anymore at all, and my hemoglobin, hematocrit are actually better, and I assume it's because my body's not reproducing them as quickly and overcompensating. And now I was having issues with iron deficiency and ferritin deficiency and B12 deficiency, and supplement with those things and don't donate blood, and I'm corrected. So yeah, I wouldn't donate blood, and then again get those levels checked and make sure that you have sufficient, that they're sufficient. And that might change within 2, 3, 4 months of not donating blood. You may replenish those things. So just as keep that in mind. Okay, next one. I'm fasting every other day. Can I take metformin before a 0 cal day? Why is this popping up? 0 cal day to stop liver releasing glycogen and get into ketosis quicker. I know energy balance rules, but I like ketosis. I won't go hypo and die because I can metabolize ketone bodies, right? Yeah, you won't die. So yeah, it might help some. It will help, like you mentioned here, it will help with hepatic glucose output, slow that down, if that's really even an issue with you. Now, here's the thing, like if you're, I don't know what you're eating on the feed days. Like if you're eating a ketogenic diet, traditional, like higher fat, maybe moderate protein at most. If that's what you're doing, then really, you're going to be depleted of glycogen both from your liver and your muscles for the most part, and probably have a pretty easy time staying in ketosis. Yeah, you may have some more potential for release of glucose from the fasting days because your body's trying to maintain, blood sugar levels. But again, if you are in a ketogenic state on the feeding days, you're probably gonna notice like minimal time to get back in ketosis. Like as soon as you, essentially, you're saying taking the metformin before a 0-cal day. Yeah, I get what you're saying, but again, like if you're already in ketosis and your liver's already depleted, then you're probably not going to release a ton on that day. A little bit. You will certainly release some just because you have to maintain blood glucose levels, like I said. So I would try it. If you can actually test ketones and give it a whirl, see if it helps. It might, you know, it might do a little bit. You might just be splitting hairs. Might not really make that much of a difference. But I get what you're saying in theory. Anything else? No, and you won't. And then in terms of like, you're not going to go hypo and die, no, because I mean, if you are slowing down hepatic glucose output, and you're gonna, I mean, your body's gonna compensate, and you're gonna have enough ketones to burn, even if it's like pulling from your body fat stores, and you have fatty acids to burn that way. You'll have an energy substrate there. Whether, you know, the mechanism might be different, but you'll have an energy substrate there, and our brains will work just fine on burning ketones and not glucose. So I mean, you'll function just fine on ketones, especially if you're used to doing it. You won't have any problems. Shouldn't have any problems with low blood sugar or anything. In fact, I did a little experiment. I talked about this before with exogenous ketones and using those and really boosting blood ketone levels up, and then my blood sugar actually would drop low, like low to where I would normally feel hypo, but I didn't feel hypo because I was using the ketones as an energy substrate. So that's kind of interesting. So how your brain may prefer those in some cases. So kind of a cool example there. All right. Couple more. Does meal frequency matter for fat loss, or does it all boil down to overall caloric balance at the end of the day? Yeah, you're going to get the zealots that are going to yell at me and say that it makes no difference. But I mean, there are some practical things to remember too, like digestion, training. You know, it's not just caloric balance is number one. You know, it's 95% of it, but all the little practical details in there are going to really determine meal frequency. And you can adjust the meal frequency too. Like, I mean, your ghrelin levels and your hunger patterns are going to adjust depending on what you are used to eating in terms of meal frequency. So you eat more meals, you're going to be hungry more often. You eat less meals, you're going to be hungry less often. That doesn't necessarily mean your metabolism is tanked. It just means that your hunger patterns have adjusted. That's why if you fast, you typically get hungry in spurts when you would normally eat or close to it. So for practical purposes, unless I'm doing some kind of like extreme fasting type of or more aggressive fasting protocol, I'm going to have most people fall in the 4 to 5 meal range, maybe 6 in some. Like a lot of people fall around 5, I notice with my clients. But again, it kind of depends, and there are some practical things to consider. So now if you're asking this because you're stressed out, like if it's a schedule thing and you're stressed that you can't get meals in or something, reduce meal frequency. It's not, you're gonna get more out of it that way just by lowering stress and adhering to the plan. So the meal frequency that's most practical for you is probably going to be the one that works the best. Last one. What do you think Andreas Munzer's body fat was? Oh my, I have no idea. Put him in one of those, what do they call them? Hydrostatic weighers. I could be wrong. I'm not sure what the hell they're called, or they dunk them in the water. I don't think they had bod pods then. I have no idea. I don't know. Probably in a really accurate assessment, I mean, it's probably sub 4%, but depending on the assessment, they're going to measure like intramuscular fat and visceral fat as well. Not sure. He may have had a shitload of visceral fat. I know his organs were all fucked up and had like tumors and shit all over him or something. So, I mean, he may have had a lot of visceral fat buildup and damage in that regard. Could be possible. So that could skew like a bod pod or something. But on calipers, you know, that wouldn't show up. So if you're doing like a 9-site caliper, he's going to be fucking like next to nothing, probably like 3%. So depend on the method. But that's it for today, guys. Thanks for all the great questions, and I will talk to you guys next week.